Hello, everyone. Welcome to Better Tech. So today we have Hussein with us. Hussein, first of all, thank you very much for joining us today on this podcast.
Thank you. Thank you, Haseeb, for having me on the podcast.
So before we officially jump into these Q&A or dialogue, can you go ahead and let us know who you are, what you do, what's your role, and something you like to tell the audience about yourself?
Well, my name is Hussein Cholkamy. I am based in Washington, D.C. I am founder and COO of Eyrus. My partner, Alex McManus, and I started this company in 2015. We are in the construction space, construction tech space. We are a workforce management software that our clients utilize for managing their construction sites. That's how we started.
Okay. So, where did this idea came from? How did it evolve? And why do you think that construction tech was a space where you wanted to venture?
Well, my partner and I, or at least the founders at the time, we had a couple of more founders that are no longer with us, but we come from the construction industry, and we had about 20 years plus or minus each. At least that's for Alex and I, in the construction space. And I came from a design perspective. I started my career as an architect. Then I got an MBA with a focus in real estate finance and jumped on the developer side. She's a mechanical engineer. She has an MBA also with a focus on finance. And she came from the municipal and government space for the procurement and management of construction in that space. Together, we understood the voids that of data that we needed to make decisions as we were on that space. So really, we found the opportunity of jumping on a space that, in our mind, was helping us build better. And so that's how companies start, right? You think you know the answer. And so you start that way, and here we are. And so we took our years of experience and understanding the industry to build a software that will work and fit within the workflow of construction while providing our clients key data for them to be able to make decisions on the fly and maintain their schedules and budgets as they work on their projects.
Right. So essentially, it seems like you were empowering your users or people
Correct.
with data, right? Hence the term that you used is data empowerment. So can you tell, in layman terms, or in easy terms, what do you exactly mean by data empowerment? Who is a beneficiary of this data empowerment, or how it's going to help people in the construction space specifically?
Well, the construction space was not always known to be a very tech advanced space. Buildings are advanced, but building the building wasn't as advanced. You're still relying on people.
Right.
70%, let's say, of an office building, the value of the construction of an office building, 70% of it is in the people that build it. The data wasn't flowing properly among people because the data helps, like you said, empower different stakeholders. So if we start with the owner or the client or the government side, the compliance, for example, on the government side is understanding who got deployed, compliance with safety, security, and also diversification. That data flows up to the client in real time from our software, where before the client had to wait for reports and data that came manually from the field, and sometimes they never made it. So the client is empowered with knowing what's happening on site in real time, but also making sure that the compliances are met so that there are no delays that are happening because of lack of compliance. On the general contractor side, and most people, at least here in the US, the general contractor is really a project management company. They're managing a lot of subcontractors, like the electrical subcontractor, mechanical, plumbing. All these guys are different little, I shouldn't say little, they're different companies. Some of them are much bigger than the general contractor themselves. and they deploy people to complete the work. And the general contractor is really the company responsible. Well, the data, so some of our projects have 1,500 people that are coming to their sites
Mm.
every day.
Mhm.
How do you
Mhm.
how do you stay on top of that? Before, it was always manual. Somebody's walking around the site checking how many electricians I have and all that. So all of a sudden now, with our software and many others, of course, but at least ours started it that way, in empowering the general contractor and knowing in real time what um who's being deployed. And when I say many others, that's because after we started, a lot of people jumped in that space. To be honest, we felt like we were the first people in that space, at least here in the US. But now the general contractor, as the project manager, knows what's going on site in real time. Any misdeployment, they know right away. I'm supposed to have 50 electricians today, only 30 showed up. And so that information in real time is very important. So the general contractor now has that data. The superintendent, the workers, the safety people walking the site, they need to know who's around them at all time. Are they trained properly? Do they have the right gear on? How can I make sure that they're not exposed to danger?
Mm.
That data is
Mhm.
important, right? So now I'm protecting the people, or I'm working to try to make sure that there are no injuries on site. That delays a project. And then the
Right.
subcontractors themselves, they need to know how many of their people are deployed. Some of these subcontractors have 300 people. They may not know actually themselves how many people are out there. So you need that data for their supervisor to be able to understand, oh, I got 300 of my people out here. Where are they in the site? What are they doing? Right? So that helps with making decisions fast. And last but not least, the worker. The worker themselves need to understand what is happening. What are the tasks they're going to build? How many hours they spent on site? Are they properly trained? Are they in the right area? Are they in the right area? So
Mhm.
all of
Mhm.
this information empowers everybody on a project. So I think it builds collaboration, it builds investment in making sure this project is done and moving forward instead of pointing fingers.
So, in your experience, do you think that, for example, this data empowerment is done for contractors, or it could be done for workers, right? So,
Yes.
or it can be worked for the owners,
Yes.
or for the people who are involved in architecting the whole thing, or maybe who are responsible for certain components or certain parts of the building only. So there could be multiple stakeholders, right? Now these people will need different data, and this data will be empowering it in a different way. So
Correct.
do you think that if, for example, these people are empowered with data in different ways, it's going to affect the project outcome in general overall? Like, for example, initially, if you were thinking that it would be a successful project in the end, but because of the lack of data empowerment, the project was a failure, or vice versa. So
Well,
what are your thoughts on this?
I wouldn't call it failure, to be honest. I would just say delays, right? So,
Okay. Yeah.
the construction, I mean, these general contractors are very good. I mean, I've not seen a general contractor who couldn't deliver a project
Mm-hmm.
that was something to be proud of, to be honest. But it's the delays. The delays are what counts. So, like, for example, we work a lot on data centers, right? Just think
Mm-hmm.
about it this way. Data center is basically a building with a big server in it. And our data right now, this video is going through a data center somewhere. I mean, at least 5 of them or 6 of them, it's going through by the time you guys hear this, right? So you can imagine, for every day of a delay of completing a data center construction, the owner of that, which could be one of the tech companies or a developer that runs data centers, is losing revenue in being able to rent that space for
Mm-hmm.
data to go through. So that's where the pressure comes on the general contractor. You have to deliver on time. And so, having the data helps them reduce the delays, because over 70% of the projects are always delayed. Is something one way or the other that comes up.
Right. So, I mean, Iris in general, can you talk to us about the journey of building Iris, like from the very beginning, like how you followed the life cycle? Did you work on an MVP first and then you build on top of it, or you do it in a big bang way? I mean, how was the journey?
Well, the journey was very um, interesting. Let's put it this way.
For sure.
Um, you know, I tell people don't jump into starting a company unless you know what you're getting into, because
Mm-hmm.
it is an easy and a difficult ride. It is also a lot of fun. So when we started, we self-funded the company at the beginning to build our MVP.
Mm-hmm.
We needed, well, first, before the MVP, we built the concept. And
Mm-hmm.
really, it was a PowerPoint presentation at the end of the day. We went around and
Sure.
started soliciting our clients that we knew already, or talking to them to see if there was any interest in that product, right? Before we jump into all of that, we just needed to do a quick market analysis, right? We found that there was traction from our partners and clients and colleagues in the market. And so that's the beginning. Then you start building the business, right? Where the business plan, how we're going to fund it, what we're going to do, what our targets, what are the markets. You need to understand all of that and document it. And then once we were convinced that there was, we as in us, the founders, were convinced that there was actually a potential here, then we started looking at how to fund it. So we self-funded it. We found a way to, so we're not coders. We don't come from that world. We don't program. So we found friends and partners that made introductions to programmers to help us understand it and price it and see how we can build it. So after you go through all that, I mean, that was a good, all of this that I'm talking about was probably about a year process before we got to a point where we could register the company. And then we started, and of course, it was about building the software and at the same time trying to convince friends and colleagues, which are your closest, to actually buy into this being a software solution they wanted. And we did. We successfully did. And we landed within 3 or 4 months of starting the company. We landed a client, our first client,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and and everything worked from there. I mean, it's always a challenge, but I think it's fun. I mean, I like the challenge. You wake up in the morning, you know that, today I'm gonna do something different. Today I'm gonna build something new. It doesn't stop. It's actually fun.
Right. So you talk about some of the takeaways, right? So for example, you mentioned that you should not start a company unless you know that what you're really getting into. That's one key takeaway from your journey. So what do you say about like top three key takeaways from your experience?
Well, the one takeaway is you gotta be the person that doesn't give up. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's if you don't have it in you, then that's very important. Not giving up. It's because starting a company is a lot of fun days and a lot of non-fun days. And those non-fun days, you have to be able to stop yourself from feeling like the world is collapsing, and be able to turn around and say to yourself, wait a minute, I'm trying to build this. Let me figure out how to stay focused. Let me stay focused on the target. Let me not let everything else take me down. The other thing is, of course, money. Money is important, right? So when you start the company, you want to make sure that, at least on a personal perspective, that you're funded enough to be able to survive without income for a bit, because
Mm-hmm.
you start a company, there's no revenue coming in for the company on day one. It takes a while. So by the time that happens, it's you have to have that patience, also the vision. You want to be able to continue to talk about your vision, continue to convince people. It's really a sales job at the end of the day. You're trying to sell your idea. um and so, yeah, those are some of the takeaways. Is, don't give up, keep going. um Make sure you're funded, make sure the idea has a demand out there. Not every idea will pick up, but not every idea is a bad idea either, right? So
So so you mentioned like not giving up, and then you also suggested that initially you bootstrapped the company, so you self-funded it. So
yes,
later, did you raise the funding from external sources as well later on?
yes, yes.
So
So yes, go ahead.
so when, at what point you actually recognized the need for an external funding?
That's a good question. I mean, at the beginning, we bootstrapped it, like I said, and between those funds, we started projecting how long that's going to serve, that's going to last for us. But that's not income
Mm-hmm.
for us. That's just supporting the development of the company, everything from registering and building software and marketing it and all that. And then very quickly, you run out of cash. And so we started a friends and family round, where basically you go among the people that love you and care for you and see if they can take a risk on you, which they did. We were lucky that we had a very solid network that helped us fund the friends and family round, which is really like a seed or pre-seed, whatever you want to call it. Then you get to a point where you have to talk to institutional funding, because that's when you realize that these institutions can help you,
Yeah.
not just from a financial perspective, but they can help you with opening doors. They can help you with understanding how to build a company and manage it. And then they can help you with making decisions at a board level. So we went out and raised money from a couple of institutions. They were still in a seed or pre-seed or pre-series A. All of these are everything that is not really other than just bring in money, giving up shares against them to bring new investors. So we landed a couple of very good institutional investors. One of them is Motley Fool, if you're familiar with them, out of Virginia, and the other one is Fuel Venture Capital. And actually, the Maryland Venture Fund was a state fund here in Maryland that supported our growth as well, or believed in our growth.
Awesome.
And then we had a couple of other different small funds. And then so now you're starting to structure your financials of the company to get to a Series A, which we just closed in February. And so you're tracking your money, you're tracking your expenditure, you're tracking your growth, and you're also continuing to grow your pitch and continuing to get more and more investors. So in this last round, our Series A, we closed a fund that was led by a New York fund called SMC, Spring Mountain Capital.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Our loyal institutional investors also invested. So Motley Fool and Fuel Venture Capital also invested in that round. And then we were able to successfully bring on Autodesk, if you're familiar with them,
Yeah.
as a construction software organization. They also were part of that investment. Now, you also have to understand that every time you invest, you're giving up shares, right? So you're diluting yourself.
Yeah.
So you want to be very careful on how much you raise and how often you raise, because if you raise more than you can deliver with, it's a problem. And if you raise too much, you're diluting yourself too much, right?
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, you're losing ownership in your own company, but you're owning less of more. And then, of course, these institutional investors, they want to be on your board. So it's like getting married. You want to pick your board properly. And we, Alex and I, have been extremely lucky with a very good board. And seriously, I mean, our board is very accessible to us. They help us make decisions. They help us open doors. And, they've been very lenient on the ups and downs, or at least collaborative on the ups and downs that companies go through as you make it to a 31,000 feet altitude, right? When you're flying.
So, right. So thanks for that. And in the end, where do you see the future of construction tech?
The future, I mean, construction tech is very important. And I think the last 3 to 5 years, especially during COVID, during the pandemic, the construction industry has realized that, yes, we need to get to the 21st century and start getting into the technology of how we manage and how we build. This is not about robots building. This is about how you have data at your fingertips and what can you do with that data. So what we're seeing, and I personally envision a future that, a general contractor or a construction site, data will be just available all across everything, from where the material is, where the equipment is, what's operating, what's not operating, how do I bill, how do I pay people, how do I pay my subcontractors, how do I pay my workers. Everything is really so connected that data can just flow and make life a lot easier for building. Because when you think about it, on one construction schedule, sometimes you have 10,000 tasks that are being built. Who's managing all that? That is so much
Hmm.
information to be just pushed around the site. And if everybody is empowered with, I have my phone and I can just know what I'm going to do today, I think it'd be a much better world and be a much safer world for everybody as well, because they'll know exactly where to go and when and what to avoid. And also will be documenting, they'll get paid properly. There'll be less claims because everybody knows what's going on. There's nothing to guess about. Anyway, that's kind of the future is going to be like everybody's going to be super tech.
Right. So in the end, I would like to really thank you, Hussein, for your time today. And I would like to hear any closing remarks that you might have, and then we can close this off.
Well, thank you. Thank you
All right.
for having me on your show as well, or your podcast.
Thank you for making the time. And I really hope that we can have another episode with you where we
Absolutely.
can dive into maybe some other topic in greater detail and talk to the audience about it.
Very good. I look
Thank you,
forward.
Hussein.
All right.
Have a good one.
You
Thanks.
too.
Bye.
Bye.